Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Picking up where we left off yesterday, reality check, Democratic policies, progressive policies, very popular, which is why the Republicans are against them. And, well, thank you, Texas. Evidently, Texas is against the idea of helping students get out of student loan debt. A federal judge in Texas has struck down the Biden student loan debt relief here a couple of days after the election. And understand, this is one of the drivers that you heard from students who thank you, Generation Z, for saving our democracy, saving us from theocratic rule. Thank you. I will never again, will not mock Gen Z again, or the millennials, the saviors of our representative democracy, and away from theocratic rule. But in the punishment, the Republican appointed judge Mark Pittman, he appointed by Donald Trump. Shock. He has said that this is not constitutional. Blocked it, and we'll see where this goes. We're going to see where this ends up, probably before the Trump-appointed Supreme Court, who will probably, who knows, block this down as well. But here's the thing: this is what we've learned from as we're digesting all of the information coming out of Tuesday. And again, I've been saying this for a very long time. Progressive policies, very popular. Run on those, making people's lives better. Yes. Do that in a big way. And I got some of those that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But the other thing is people didn't buy the right-wing hair on fire over inflation. In fact, the messaging around it's corporate America seems to have gotten through, that it wasn't the $1,400 that Biden handed out. Wasn't it? It was corporate America doing what corporate America does. Gouging. And the thing is look, we the people, again, fairly progressive views. And when you run on those progressive values, when you run on those issues, you win. So the message, and this is the message going forward, run on the stuff that works. Focus group tested language from the right, that's the base. That's the money-making machine over there. That's the outrage candy. But what's actually going to make people's lives better? For instance, Colorado. Voters in the state of Colorado, and I know this will make a couple of listeners really happy who send me stuff on this all the time. Voters in Colorado passed a ballot measure that would provide free meals for all public school students. None of this nonsense of, you're going to have your card and you have to have money on it. If you don't, we're going to literally snatch food out of the mouths of children. No, they said, you know what? This is a progressive value. Yes, feeding people, a progressive value. And you go, how do you say that, Rick? Well, I grew up during the Reagan years where Mr. Ketchup as a vegetable literally destroyed the school program, the lunch program over the summers that I knew kids who benefited from, I being one of them. These things are winners. Also, on the labor front, minimum wage, very popular. I don't know why it hasn't happened here in Pennsylvania. Oh, that's right. We've got Republicans in the Senate now. Thank goodness that's flipping. Nebraska voters approved a ballot measure going to raise their state's minimum wage up to $15 an hour by 2026. I know not soon enough, but on the path to get there. You had Oregon, Alabama, Tennessee, Vermont. They all passed ballot measures to take antiquated language out of their constitution that allowed slavery and forced labor from people who've committed crimes. Because understand, one of the things corporate America has done very well is they have benefited off of people being incarcerated. Here, we'll pay you 30 cents an hour to do our work, when they should have been paying people in the workforce to do that work, or paying at least the minimum wage. Good on them for doing that. South the freaking Dakota. They voted to expand Medicaid. Let me say this again. South Dakota voted to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Yes, the dreaded Obamacare. South Dakota. It's going to provide tens of thousands of people with access to health care. Again, progressive policies, making lives better. This is what people should be. This is what they should be running on. This is what they should be fighting for. This is what, again, Democrats, if you're listening, making lives better. This is the stuff. Stay out of all the craziness. This is the stuff. For instance, the Toledo City Council, and we were in Toledo on our Working Class Heroes radio tour, met a bunch of folks there, fabulous people. This is one of the things that came up that they were talking about, canceling medical debt. So last night, the City Council there in Toledo, they approved $800,000 to purchase somewhere between $160 and $240 million in medical debt. And you go, well, how's that possible? Well, there was money from the American Rescue Plan that was allocated by the federal government to cities and states to, well, help citizens who were adversely impacted by the pandemic. So they chose that, hey, a lot of people had medical debt that was run up because of the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we're going to help them. We're not going to allow their credit to be destroyed. We're not going to allow them to be saddled with this debt for all these. And they did something about it. This is what government should be doing. A government of, for, and by we, the people. Now, you go, but Rick, there's socialism. Nobody screams socialism when you're bailing out the savings and loans back in the 80s. Nobody was screaming socialism when we bail out the big banks. Nobody was screaming socialism when we bail out corporate America again and again. But you know what? We help a working person, and oh my gosh, it's hair on fire. Slippery slope. They're going to get used to it. They're going to want more. They're going to get greedy. Come on, man. It's actually quite comical. But I come back to this, and I come back to this for a reason. Because, the messaging machine that the Democrats have floundered under. I think Tim Ryan ran the right campaign. It's the economy, stupid. It's talking about making lives better. It's progressive policies that are going to make sure that people get ahead. Healthcare, education, opportunity. That's the wheelhouse. That's where they should be, and that's where this is where I think Biden said, "Look, I'm not changing a thing." And good on Joe. And to me, that's the message that came out of Tuesday. I do want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you've got a thought on what did you take from Tuesday, what did the election results say to you? To me, it said, look, maybe we're not as divided as the corporate-controlled mainstream media wants us to believe. Maybe working people, there's an opportunity for us in this moment to come together and say, hey, Republicans, if you do take the House, get something done, or there will be a red wave of you being flushed out. This is one of those moments, because again, I go back to the FDR years. You want me to do something? Make me do it. This isn't over. This is the beginning of the next phase of pushing our political leaders into action. When the wealthy want something, they know how to get it. They know what to do. They know who to push, which arms to proverbially twist. They get it. We have to do the same. We have to organize. And I say, look, they've got all the money. We've outprocreated them. There are more of us. And if we just come together, maybe we get health care for everybody. Maybe that's not something we have to fret over in the moments that tragedy strikes. So I'm curious, what is it that you have taken from the election? And, it's not over yet. Look, the numbers are still being calculated. We still don't know who is going to have control yet. The Democrats could still end up with controlling both houses. It could be split. Republicans could end up with both. We will see where this lands us. But I'm curious the message out of this. But again, this was historic because everybody, and I went into Tuesday going, I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. Were people angry enough? Were women going to be mad enough? I wasn't seeing it outwardly. They came out. The younger generation, were you going to get the young people to come out? They came out. But more importantly, the independents. The independents came out for Democrats, and in a midterm, for the independents to come out for the party in power, that sends huge messages, which is crazy people running the party there. So I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. I'm going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts on the other side. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, some big historic stuff happening. In fact, you look at Wisconsin, for instance. Republicans failed to secure a supermajority in their state legislature. That means a whole bunch of horrible isn't going to happen, even though they have jerry-rigged that state in some of the worst ways. Massachusetts has more. They're going to have more Democrats in their House than they've had in any session since 2009. You've got here in Pennsylvania, you've got Democrats who have taken back the House for the first time in decades and have kept the governor's mansion. That is a huge thing. Also, Michigan, Democrats are poised to win full control of the state government there. Taking majorities in the legislature for the first time in 40 years. And you go, gee, that's what fair maps look like. Hey, that's when the voters get to pick their representatives. Wow, weird how that happens. But then again, you look at Ohio, that, the Republicans control, I think the House in this last session was 64-34 in the House and 25-7 in the Senate. And yet it's a 53-47 state. How do you get that other than really creative maps? And these maps that they've now illegally drawn, even worse. Scary times, folks, but this is why now is not the time to put our head down or to turn away and do other things. It's time to stay engaged. Just my thought. Let's go to the phones. We got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. I believe people are finally waking up and going, there's apparently something going on here, and maybe I need to wake up and take a closer look. Because I've noticed more people going, these Republicans seem a bit out of control, and you're thinking to yourself a bit. But I think that's what's going on. I think a lot of people, because up to this point, we as a majority of progressive, liberal, open-minded people have just sort of gone, oh, well, whatever. If you want to think that, whatever. And we've just gone on about our business. But now that they're trying to impose their will on the rest of us, people are waking up. I mean, there's an old saying that says, the easiest way to lose control of things is to be too open-minded, because when you're too open-minded, you shrug everything off, and the people that are closed-minded start imposing their will. And I think that's what's going on. People are waking up.
No, I hope so. Look, and I'm waiting to see what happens in Ohio, and I think Ohio is going to be that place that should be the cautionary tale for all of us, looking what they're going to do here in the lame duck when there's nobody going to hold them accountable, because they've got massive majorities all across their government. We're going to see, the transgender bill, I think, is coming, a horrible abortion bill, more education nonsense to privatize, profitize, and destroy. Just all the craziness that Republicans, everything on their wet dream list, I think, is going to be banging around there between now and the end of the year.
I think you're right. I have cousins that live in the Salem, Ohio, and a few other areas around in there, and they are just really upset over some of the things that are going on out there, and it's just crazy. And my one cousin, she is a teacher, so you can imagine that. And she and her husband had also fostered children, and they had adopted some biracial children a few years ago. And they have been really up in arms because people have just come right out and, been as racist as could be. Plus, they had to put the one little boy into a special classes because he was so traumatized.
Wow. This is sadly the world that some want to take us to, and it's our job to make sure that doesn't happen. Alice, I appreciate the thoughts, though. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Good stuff. Good stuff as always. I got a quick email from Betty in Oshkosh. I loved my time in Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Air Support Group there. Rick, I read an article at Time talking about how smart the Dems were for pouring lots of money into getting extreme GOP candidates through their primaries. I was wondering if you thought that was a good use of resources, and is this going to be the norm? You may remember, and for those who don't remember, back, I think it was, over the summer, you had a letter written by 35 Democratic leaders, an open letter, complaining, criticizing the moneyed people on the Democratic side for, how did it go? That they were risking, promoting unethical candidates whose campaigns would, basically erode the trust of our elections. And, basically what was going on is, some of the moneyed interests were promoting the craziest of the crazy, the Doug Mastrianos of the world. And this letter, I think it was August. They said, look, our democracy's fragile. We can't tolerate political parties attempting to prop up, these horrible candidates, and we should stop. And at the time I said, this is what Republicans have always done. They've gotten away with this stuff. This isn't new. You always try and pick who you think you're going to do better against. Not new. This is how the game has been played for a very long time. Let's just hope the brain trust does well. Now, they spent a lot of money. It said something like, I think the Washington Post said something like $19 million that the Democrats spent on, I'm not sure, I think it was like 13 or 14 primary races that they got involved in. And in the primaries, 6 of those people won their primaries. So they spent $19 million. Now understand, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on elections. $19 million is not an enormous sum of money when you're looking at what we spend on the Senate race just here in Pennsylvania, something like $350 million. So in what were pretty substantial races, $19 million isn't an awful lot. But in a primary, it kind of pushed people like Mastriano to the front. So they spent money and intervened in what were 13 races. 6 of those people won the primaries. Obviously, 7 did not. All of them lost the general. So if you go, you know what, maybe it was smart to put a Mastriano in Pennsylvania against Shapiro, who was the extreme of the extreme of the extreme. Maybe a more moderate candidate would have done better. Who knows? Fortunately, we don't have to. But they spent $1.2 million in the primary propping up Mastriano, who was a Trump denier, supporter, election denier, was at January 6th, was all these things. Was $1.2 million worth it to get him? That's clearly the candidate and the people putting this out there. But he lost, and lost big. Don Bolduc up in New Hampshire. They spent $3.2 million on the Senate campaign there. Looks like Maggie Hassan's won that campaign. So there's that. You had in Illinois and in Maryland, you had two Republicans that they backed. Both lost the gubernatorial races there. Was it worth it? Okay. The one that got all the attention, you may remember, was Representative Peter Meyer, the Republican who voted to impeach Trump. The Democrats spent some money, I think it was like a couple $100,000, to go after this election, to push this election denier, John Gibbs, who beat Peter Meyer in the primary. And everyone was saying, well, this is, a Republican did the right thing and you've punished him. That's how politics works. But in the grand scheme of things, the Democrat Hillary Scholten won the seat, and the Democrats picked one up in a year where they were supposed to get just wiped out. Do I like dirty politics? No. But it's the world we live in, and this is sadly the reality. The people who are questioning this are the people who are going, when they go low, we go high. I'm not that guy. I'm when they go low, you mash their head into the ground, just like if you were playing football and they came after your knees. Do I like it? No. But it's the world we live in, sadly. And it's up to us. And again, this is where I come back to, it's up to the voters. It's up to us to wade through this stuff. It's up to us to go, you know what? This is too dirty pool, and hold people accountable. Because understand, Republicans have been doing this for years. Democrats did it once, got caught, and oh my gosh, there was craziness to be had. So to answer the question, Betty, do I like it? No. Do I support what they did? Yeah. Now that the fact is they won. We need these seats. We need to move an agenda that's going to help working people. Do I think we need a whole bunch of election reforms so that things like this don't happen? Absolutely. Do I think we need to change the playing field and level the playing field? Absolutely. Do we need to get huge money out of politics? You bet. I'm a fan of publicly funded elections, to where, you know what, you get an X amount of money, you get X amount of resources, and who runs the best campaign, they win. But sadly, that ain't going to happen because of the Supreme Court we got, because of the moneyed interests that have so much riding on, well, who's in power. That's why it's up to us. We should be voting on what's in our best interests. That's my view. Thanks, Betty. Appreciate the email. And if you've got a thought, question, comment, I want to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Again, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day workers at International Harvester went out on strike. At the time, it was the UAW's longest strike. 35,000 UAW members at 21 plants in 8 states downed their tools. For 172 days, Harvester workers walked the picket lines over seniority rights and forced overtime. They had long resisted mandatory overtime rules. Workers at Harvester were the only UAW UAW members anywhere who still enjoyed the 8-hour day, 5-day work week. They had no intention of giving that up, especially in the industrial downturn of the period that threw over 100,000 auto workers out of their jobs. Harvester argued the company had lost $1.3 billion in recent years because of work rules. The company hoped to force a concessionary contract. But 6 weeks into the strike, the company announced a 98% increase in profits for the year. 3 months into the strike, Harvester hinted it would drop its demand for forced overtime in exchange for part-time hires that would be non-union. The company also hoped to do away with seniority rights in job bidding. Despite injunctions that limited picket lines, strikers were able to minimize scabbing and shipments in and out of many plants. At a plant just outside Chicago, striking Local 6 members marched outside company offices with a burning effigy of hated Harvester president Archie McCardle, chanting "No forced overtime." Victory finally came in April. Harvester workers stood tough for months against company attacks in a period of massive plant and mill closures across the country. They secured seniority rights in job bidding and beat back attacks against mandatory overtime. As for McCardle, brought in to slash and burn the union workforce, he was fired.
America exists today as a bizarre anomaly. We profess to be an electoral democracy, yet we are ruled by a governmental plutocracy. One especially gross example of this incongruity is the overwhelming power of big money over the people's will. By a wide margin, Americans of all political stripes want to ban the distorting force of huge electoral campaign donations by favor-seeking corporations and ultra-rich elites. Yet, nothing. National and state lawmakers take the plutocratic money and promptly bury democratic reforms that would stop the gusher of corrupt cash. An analysis of donations in this year's congressional races shows that this plutocratic perversion of our politics and government has reached absurd levels. Historian Nancy McLean and public interest advocate Frank Clemente have documented that the two main super PACs trying to put Republicans in Congress got about half of their $188 million election fund from just 27 billionaires. Also, a corporate front that backs GOP candidates, Club for Growth, got nearly $35 million from only 3 billionaires. Thanks to years of congressional stonewalling and the steady partisan stacking of our top courts with corporate ideologues, there is essentially no limits on this purchase of lawmakers. Indeed, the biggest donors are even allowed to undermine democracy in secret, not revealing their identity. Lawmakers elected with this money not only support the billionaires' special interest agenda, which the people don't want, but also are fierce opponents of any reforms to increase voter participation in our governing process, which people do want. This is Jim Hightower saying that's why, for example, efforts to guarantee every eligible American a constitutional right to vote have not moved forward in Congress, even though the great majority of people favor it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the president had a good Tuesday. The president had a good night. I mean, really, it was a vindication of his policies, of his legislative victories, of which there have been many. This was, I think the American people going, yeah, we need more of this. We need somebody who cares what happens to working people. And they didn't, like I said, didn't buy the whole inflation scare tactic thing. That really, really important. Now the question is where do we go from here? Where does this take us? I'm here to share some thoughts on the election results and where we go from here. I've asked Doug Jones to come talk with us. Doug Jones, the former senator from the great state of Alabama. Senator Jones, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's always great to be with you, buddy, especially this week, man. It's been a good week.
Now, this was huge. Were you expecting this?
I think I've been traveling all over the country, Rick. I feel like I've been living the Johnny Cash song. I've been everywhere. And so you really did feel it out there. But at the same time, I'm like so many people, I kind of fell into the trap of, listening to a lot of pundits in the last couple of days, and I'm thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, is it going to be this bad? But my wife will tell you, I'm just always, whether it's when I was trying cases, I'm always somewhat pessimistic about juries and things like that. But at the end of the day, once these numbers started coming in, man, it was just, I think, a vindication for so many of us, so many people that have been out there, you and others that have been touting these messages to say, folks, think about it before you vote. Think about what you're doing. And I think it was an incredible vindication of that.
No, the fact of the matter is, as we did our tour, as we went through 9 different states and talked to people across urban and rural areas, you came away with progressive policies are extraordinarily popular. Even if progressives aren't, the policies are. Working class populism is extremely popular.
Well, and I think, too, that there's a lot to be said if you look around the country. And I think that the progressive politics involves so many things, not just for, wages and the working class folks, but involving equality and human rights and civil rights. And if you look at what happened around the country, in addition to the victories in the House, the victories in the Senate, every time there was a ballot measure on the ballot, every time there was a referendum that was on the ballot that didn't have a candidate, didn't have an R or a D, abortion, Medicaid expansion, those things, they all passed. When the people stand up on these issues, they make progress. And what we've got to do going forward is that we got to make sure that we can translate that into candidates and not just ballot measures.
No, you're exactly right. And in fact, it's where I started today's show, going through a list of all of the raising the minimum wage, expanding Medicaid, all of those things, extremely popular. So why can't we get that stuff through the Senate? This is where, I've been saying for years, the Senate seems to be the place where progress goes to die, or anything that's going to help the working class seems to die. This is kind of that thing. So it's almost like maybe we abolish the Senate, we just put things out for popular vote on a certain level.
Extreme? I don't want to do that. You know me, a little bit too extreme. But I will tell you, I do think that we've got to continue to get those messages out. The country has become so partisan these days, and so tribal. People put on their jerseys, and there's so many people that just don't even think about the issues. And we got to break through that. And I think that's going to be the challenge in the next couple of years, to not just go out and bash Republicans, but to go out and talk about issues and who Democrats are, who progressives are, but do it in a way that is with these issues, because the issues are on our side. We've just got to get that across to make sure that when people go to the ballot box in 2 more years, that they vote on those issues and they vote on those candidates who best represent those issues, and they don't just vote for a tribe.
Yeah, I've been saying for the longest time, it's not about the red hat or the blue hat. It's about the hard hat. We've got a lot of work to do to rebuild this country and pull us back together. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with former Alabama Senator Doug Jones. Doug, I'm looking at some of these races, and I don't want to focus on the Ohio race. I was shocked by the outcome of that race. I thought Tim Ryan ran what was the right campaign. He was right on the issues, talking about how we're going to make working families' lives better. Any thoughts on that race?
I completely agree with you. I was with Tim up there for a couple of days. I saw some energy. He absolutely had the right message. Part of the problem is that Democrats had given up on Ohio. We've seen that happen in the South. We've seen that happen in other states where Democrats have just given up and not played. Rick, you just can't have a great candidate and expect to get a great result. You've got to really, people need some nurturing. They need to be educated on a daily basis. 12 months out of the year, we need to be talking about those issues. Tim ran a great campaign, and I think it's a lesson for Democrats going forward that we need to start replicating that message and start getting some of these voters back. He ran a super race. He didn't get where he should have gotten. He should have won the race, I thought. But I think we'll continue to have those messages in Ohio. We cannot give up on these voters in Ohio or Alabama or anywhere else in the country. We've got to go where people are and say, look, I understand what you think about Republicans versus Democrats, but let me tell you who I am. Let me tell you my purpose here. And that's what I think more Democrats need to be talking about and going and where we are. And I think we can do that. But I was just so proud of Tim and the race he ran, because he did it his way.
Yeah. No, we had him on the program. He was fantastic. And again, right on the issues where I think Democrats need to go back to, because as we were talking to people, especially in rural America, they believe Democrats have given up on them. They believe, unions have given up on them in rural America. And I keep telling my union friends, we've got to get back into those places and fight for those votes and fight for those people's hearts and minds.
There's no question about it. And Rick, there's nothing inconsistent with fighting for those people's hearts and minds and the other policies that we are talking about, because we're talking about bringing good jobs in the CHIPS Act. We're talking about helping manufacturing. We're doing all. There's nothing inconsistent with the way things are now, and talking about equality and the issues that affect all Americans and the rural voters, the middle class voters, the low wealth voters, the working folks, the union folks that are out there every day who are making the money for these corporations. There's nothing inconsistent about that. Yeah. But we have tended not to bridge that gap. We've tended not to connect those dots. And I think if we can start and will start connecting those dots, we will make significant inroads.
No, and it's got to be, I look at, as we were doing our tour, one of the things that kept coming up is infrastructure. How many people didn't know how much money is going to be coming into their community through broadband access? We went across Iowa and there were places where it was an internet dead zone. There was nothing through huge swaths of Iowa, huge swaths of Wisconsin. And you go, this is what we should be talking about. We're going to fix this. We're going to make lives better. This is the 21st Century Electrification Act. This is getting
there's no question.
This is getting places into the 21st century. Why aren't we hearing that every single day? I know my friends at CWA and the broadband brigade are out there preaching the message, but why aren't we hearing this every single day?
Well, I tell you, Rick, I don't know the answer right now. I know that in my race in 20, we tried to do that across Alabama as well. Here's what I think, though. I think that in the next 2 years, you're going to see this administration and Democrats across the board giving that message, because here's what's going to be happening in the next 2 years. The administration is going to be implementing that broadband. They're going to be implementing the Infrastructure Act. They're going to be building roads. They're going to be building bridges. They're going to be doing the things that are tangible and visible and not just kind of down the road and in the future. It's going to be something people can wrap their arms around. They can see it. They can feel it. They can touch it. And I think that as we go forward these next 2 years, people are going to look at that Infrastructure Act. They're going to look at the Inflation Reduction Act. They're going to look at the CHIPS Act and say, damn, these guys do have our best interest at heart. This is making America great. This is bringing jobs back into the homeland. This is bringing jobs, good paying jobs that are also, by the way, helping with issues involving the climate and saving the planet. And all of a sudden, I think the next 2 years are going to be critical for Democrats. We've got an amazing opportunity to just drive that message home. And if we don't do it, that's on us. That's on us.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to be out there. You're going to be out there. Tim Ryan's going to be out there, even though he won't be in the Congress. We're going to be trying to drive that message everywhere in all 50 states.
And what I've been saying for the last couple of months is what the administration should do. Giant 15, 20-foot cardboard cutouts of Joe Biden pointing, going, I did this. That's what we should have.
Absolutely. And Rick, let me tell you, when I was growing up, and I'm older than you are, but when I can remember seeing signs when there was a bridge construction, when there was a road construction, there was something going up that was literally that sign that said, your tax dollars at work. Because people obviously don't like to pay more taxes than they want to, but they like to be able to see that they're having a benefit. We absolutely should be doing that. I love the idea of the I did that. I think that's a great. We really need to be pushing those messages. We need to be putting those billboards up. We need to be erecting our own dang. We need to have people walking around with sandwich boards if we need to say this is tax dollars. This is what Democrats do for you guys.
No, I mean, but look, you remember a couple of months ago, you had idiots running around slapping, Biden did this stickers all over gas pumps.
Yeah.
I say take those stickers and put them to good use, to something that he actually did
Absolutely.
do.
And by the way, I would redo the stickers on the gas pumps and start pointing down and putting up a little higher and saying, I did this too, as the gas prices are lowering a little bit too. So, I mean, look, we just got to grab the mantle of the progress that I think and the successes that this administration's had.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you think of Tulsi Gabbard's comments that it was almost treasonous, that it was despicable that Joe Biden did something to lower gas prices?
I try not to think about Tulsi Gabbard. Okay,
there's the answer.
Just candidly. I anytime I see her name, I just go to the next paragraph because she's just lost her mind.
Maybe we can help her find it at some point. But I do want to get some of your thoughts on look, the Senate is still up in the air. The House is still up in the air. Over the next couple of days, still lots of uncertainty. But the Senate, let's go there since you know that the best. Georgia again, another runoff. Any thoughts? I mean, I got to tell you, I'm in a struggle position because I look at somebody like Herschel Walker, who shouldn't even be allowed to visit the Senate, let alone be a U.S. senator. I can't imagine it is this close.
No, what can you say about that? I completely agree with you. But I think that's kind of where this country is in the sense of how both the parties have made this very tribal about power and the gavel and control of the Senate. And I think that is something that Walker is benefiting from, because you're right. I just don't see how in the world this is a choice between a guy like Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. And that doesn't, look, you can say a lot of things, but the fact of the matter is, it's not just the fact that he has one stance on abortion now, but obviously another one when it was affecting him. What really I think people in Georgia need to be thinking about is this guy just doesn't tell the truth. He's not honest with the people of Georgia. He's not honest with his family. And and we need to be electing people that have some authenticity, that can be honest with folks and look them in the eye. And this is where it's going to be. And he's just going to be a puppet.
No, the worst thing about it, though,
in Georgia are going to see that.
Yeah, the worst thing about it is I don't think he knows what the truth is, and the fact that we're in a weird spot. I mean, I look at him, someone who said, my wife is afraid that I'm going to murder her. How does that not disqualify you from being in the Senate? I look at Ron Johnson in Wisconsin,
I get it.
Who said, we've got enough good paying union jobs here in Wisconsin. Let those go down to South Carolina. We don't need those Oshkosh defense jobs. How does that not disqualify you? I remember a day when that would have been the end of your candidacy. How is it possible these people are still?
Yeah, there's no question. Well, look, again, I go back to this, and I said this the other day in an interview that I did, and I really think you can talk about abortion, you can talk about inflation, you can talk about crime, you can talk about all those issues, but the biggest single driver for people voting in this election was their political affiliation and their tribalism. That was the biggest single driver. After that, it's those issues that actually maybe decide the election, but that is a smaller swath in America today than it used to be.
Yeah.
And what we need to get back, and look, I have no problem with people being loyal to a political party. I get that. I understand it. I appreciate it. But at the same time, we need to not be so tribal that we will look the other way when you have a Herschel Walker. They didn't look the other way, Rick, in my race in 2017 when I ran against Roy Moore. At least enough people didn't. I won that race, but damn, I barely won it, okay? over a guy like that. And it was purely tribalism and who's going to hold the gavel in the United States Senate. And we need to get back to a little bit more to say, yeah, I'm loyal to this party to a point, but then I'm going to put my country, my state over that party affiliation.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with former Alabama Senator Doug Jones. And I wanted to get your thoughts on Trump and the right-wing spin machine. They're spreading more conspiracy theories about voting on the social the truth. I guess Truth Social over his little internet thing. More of the disinformation. More of the there's theft around every corner. We won every election. At some point, don't we have to do something about all of this this misinformation? Section 230 doesn't have to be on the table at some point.
It would seem that it needs to be on the table if they don't do things themselves. I mean, you've got, look, Twitter is in a whole different world right now, and there's so much uncertainty around that. There is, I do think that there is not as much traction on all of that misinformation about election denying in Arizona and Nevada right now, because all the election deniers got the crap beat out of them the other night. And I think Trump got the crap beat out of him the other night. And so he's spinning a yarn, he's doing this stuff, but at the same time, there's not as many people paying attention right now. And that's just picking up a little bit right now. And it hasn't been for 2 days. And you don't hear the candidates out there saying it as much. It's people outside of Nevada. It's people outside of Arizona. And look, I'm hoping that we're seeing the beginning of the end of that.
Yeah.
But you're not going to completely get rid of it at all. But I will say, rather than lawsuits and getting rid of Section 230, it would be so much better if this came from people and people started rejecting that BS and started on their own really looking at this. And that's what maybe we're seeing a little bit of that happening. I hope so.
I got to tell you though, there's part of me that goes, we're just not mature enough to have the internet. We just can't have nice things. I'm just sorry, because the sad reality is for a good number of people, we're the worst version of ourselves online. And I don't know how you get away from that.
Well, look, I've said for a long time, when I was U.S. Attorney 20 years ago, and the internet was really beginning to take off, and you saw these hate sites and things and chat rooms and all, and it really proliferated a little bit at that. And I said then that what we've got to do is to try to educate people a little bit better, that there are dark forces out there. We've got to make sure that we are pushing back on those dark forces. We've got to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to see every side. This is still the wild, wild west on the internet. I still think we're slow to adapt to these kind of things. And this is not an unusual process. But, at the end of the day, Rick, I still put a little bit of faith in, I put a lot of faith in the American people to go through a process, to understand and see, and things ebb and flow, and you get these cycles. I just think that ultimately the American people are going to see this for what it is, and they're going to move back into a more sense of normalcy and reality. That is not going to happen tomorrow or next year, but I think hopefully we're beginning to see the makings of that right now. And I think you did see that when so many people across this country rejecting these conspiracy theorists and these election deniers.
Yeah, we've got a lot to do. So kind of to wrap this up and move into a positive direction, because the hope is that at least Democrats end up with the with the Senate, and again I'm hoping that in the runoff that Warnock comes out on this as they did last time. The direction, where do you think things are going to go? Do you think anything's going to get done with a Republican-led House? Do you think they're going to go crazy and do the impeachment stuff? Do you have any thoughts, any predictions, anything that you're feeling?
Yeah, look, I think right now they are in a shambles. I think they're in a turmoil. I think Kevin McCarthy is not knowing, whether to as they say, I'm not sure he knows whether to wind his butt or scratch his watch. I mean, because it's kind of a crazy situation over there right now. He's got a huge Freedom Caucus that's going to be demanding things they didn't expect. I do think that ultimately they will have the majority, but it's going to be a very slim majority. That's kind of where I think things are going on that. And, it really depends. If they want to try to govern, it's going to be really difficult for McCarthy, I think, to keep that Republican caucus in some kind of cohesive nature. I really think he's going to have a tough time. The Freedom Caucus is going to demand some things. And so I think that leaves open so much mischief with, investigations over a laptop and impeachment inquiries and this, that, and the other. But you know what? Hopefully we can hold the Senate. If we can hold the Senate, the administration can go to hell with you. We will comply with subpoenas that are legitimate. We will do what we can to comply with your oversight. But you know what? We're going to implement the Inflation Reduction Act. We're going to make sure the infrastructure is done, and we're going to go steady as she goes for this country. And we're going to prove to the American people that we're not just a bunch of friggin' crazies out there that are just seeking political power. We are doing things for people. So I have a lot of confidence in this administration. I have a lot of confidence in Democrats in the House to be able to stay the course and steady as she goes.
No, it's something we absolutely need. Now on the Warnock Herschel Walker runoff front, how do we help? How do I got a bunch of texts and direct messages from people going, "Hey, ask how we help. What do we do in these days?" Because again, this is another one of those weird Georgia law changes. Georgia's doing a lot of funny stuff with their election laws. This is another one. How soon this election runoff is going on? But what do folks do?
Yeah. Now, look. First of all, if you have any little bit of money, help. Put it in with the Warnock campaign. Put it in with the DSCC. There are folks that are going to be down there. They're going to be helping. The other thing I think that you can do is just by talking this race up, by talking about the Raphael Warnock, not making this about control of the Senate, but about the issues and things that people care about, and and talking about the facts about Herschel Walker. And all of the issues that he's had with his domestic violence, the lack of being able to tell the truth, the flip-flopping on all of these things that come up. I think people can really have an effect on this, but obviously they're going to need some infrastructure down there. I hope that the Stacey Abrams machine will get out to vote, because you know what? Stacey Abrams and her fair fight in Georgia, the New Georgia Project, they really built something special in Georgia. It unfortunately was not able to overcome what the incumbency of Brian Kemp this year, but they need to. I hope that people in Georgia understand how important it is for that machinery, that infrastructure to be in place to help get Raphael Warnock over the finish line here, because that is a state that can really be a player down the road. It was a player in 2020. It's a player right now. And there's a lot of things I think people can do to help. Cards, letters, anything that folks can do. If you want to go down there and knock on doors, knock on doors. I mean, it's going to be intense over the next 30 days.
And again, another one of those shenanigans under Senate Bill 202, of which we've talked about extensively. And again, today, last day for you to be able to see VigilanteTheMovie.com, Greg Palast's movie on what's going on down there in Georgia. But Doug, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Great stuff as always. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
You know I will, Rick. Anytime, just give me a buzz. Thanks for all you. Thanks for all you and your listeners are doing to help save democracy. Thanks so much.
Great stuff. Thanks so much. Former Alabama Senator Doug Jones. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
definitely not a Republican wave, that's for darn sure.
Missing red wave in 2022 midterms is good news for the climate. Skyrocketing levels of climate warming methane, plus...
Don't be fooled. Prop 30 is being advertised as a climate initiative.
Mixed results for environmental ballot propositions.
All of those results and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Newsom's ultimate victory is likely to be a landslide, which, since this is California, will be followed by an earthquake and a wildfire.
True story. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I'm happy to hear that the midterm elections were not a disaster for the climate.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of disasters, Florida is once again in trouble.
Yes, a rare November hurricane, Hurricane Nicole, made landfall on Florida's east coast overnight Wednesday as a Category 1. Fueled by record warm ocean waters, the sprawling, slow-moving storm has brought significant rain and flooding to storm-weary parts of Florida, still damaged by deadly Hurricane Ian a month ago. President Biden has approved emergency disaster relief for the state. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration warns in a new report this week that levels of powerful climate-warming methane continue to rocket up at record rates, with concentrations now more than 160% of pre-industrial levels. A new report by the International Energy Agency reveals that globally, methane pollution from the fossil fuel industry is 70% higher than countries are officially reporting. The Global Methane Tracker also found that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is seriously underestimating the oil and gas industry's methane pollution by as much as 70%.
What's worse, carbon or methane?
They're both really bad, but methane is a more powerful climate-warming pollutant than carbon dioxide over a shorter time period, like 20 years.
Whereas carbon stays in the atmosphere for
like hundreds of years.
Got it.
Now on to the critical 2022 midterm elections. As we go to air, we still don't know who will control the U.S. House or Senate next year, with several close races not yet decided. But the corporate media's conventional wisdom of a Republican red wave did not materialize.
Shocking.
Some notable climate-related results. Republican climate science denier Senator Ron Johnson won re-election in Wisconsin.
Boo.
Pennsylvania's Democratic Lieutenant Governor and climate hawk John Fetterman soundly defeated Trump-endorsed TV doctor Mehmet Oz.
Yay.
In the U.S. House, despite heavy gerrymandering in Republican-controlled states, voters in Ohio flipped a seat held by longtime Republican climate science denier Representative Steve Chabot, giving it to Democrat Greg Landsman. North Carolina rejected a science-denying Republican to elect Democratic climate hawk Wiley Nickel.
North Carolina did that?
Yep, and in Illinois, Democrat Eric Sorensen will be the first meteorologist in Congress in 50 years.
Really?
Climate hawks also won top state offices in major wins for climate and clean energy. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, who is suing Big Oil to pay for climate damages, was elected Massachusetts' first female governor.
So I presume that whoever the new AG is will continue that lawsuit?
Presumably, yes. Maryland elected climate hawk Wes Moore as its first black governor, defeating Republican climate denier Dan Cox, who was labeled one of the worst environmental candidates in the nation by the League of Conservation Voters.
And he lost.
He lost big time. In remarks on Wednesday, President Biden thanked young voters for tipping the scales with record turnout across the country in state and federal races, and he warned Republicans,
I'm not going to walk away from the historic commitments we just made to take on the climate crisis. They're not compromisable issues to me, and I won't let it happen.
Nice.
Climate advocacy groups heralded the enormous organizing effort to mobilize young voters. Nonprofit climate group Evergreen Action said that actually delivering on bold, concrete climate investments like the Inflation Reduction Act are an electoral winner. Quote, just months after passing historic climate legislation, Democrats across the country have defied historic trends and achieved one of the best midterms for a sitting president's party in recent memory. And finally, results from statewide climate and environment ballot initiatives were mixed. Voters in California appear to have rejected a proposition that would have raised taxes on millionaires to fund the transition to electric vehicles after Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom labeled it a Trojan horse giveaway to a rideshare company. Florida voters rejected a tax break for property owners that harden their properties against flooding and rising sea levels. However, New Yorkers approved a $4 billion state bond measure to upgrade the state's infrastructure against climate impacts and rising seas.
Nice. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, some interesting news. The Biden administration has they've released the interviews with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, as I understand it. April 2004, the interview with the bipartisan 9/11 Commission evidently took place in the Oval Office. And I guess the big part of this is that Bush gave Cheney the okay to shoot down a commercial jetliner. And look, did we not know that? But maybe we'll start to, find out all the rest. And maybe my friend Bob Ney will be able to tell us all of the things that were presented to him in the secret meetings that no one's allowed to talk about that got us into 20 years of war. Maybe that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on Tuesday's results, maybe a little of this. Maybe we could get to the bottom of what really happened around the aftermath of 9/11. But our good friend Sarah Burris is back. She is my favorite reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, wonderful to see you again.
Hello, it's been so long.
It has. Tuesday. So since Tuesday, because we didn't know a lot Tuesday night. We were speculating, we were hoping. Thoughts now, looking back?
Remember how I'm always the optimistic one?
Yes.
See, I told you so.
Well, it's good talking with you, Sarah. Have a great night.
Waiting for days to say that. So I think that the thing that we really talked about, I think, though, is that for the next couple of years, obviously Congress is going to be a Republican. We knew that by
the House
by Tuesday evening. So I think that our idea, our concept of, everybody needs to be out in the states and they need to be talking to voters and doing the kind of bridge openings and infrastructure stuff that we were talking about. I think that still holds. I think that still needs to continue because obviously there's not going to be a whole lot of legislating. I think Biden's going to try. He made it very clear he'll give it the old college try, but I don't believe for a second that McCarthy is going to want to deal with him. And it's very clear that Biden can outsmart the right wing whenever it comes to this kind of stuff. And he's been playing this like the reasonable man game, right? This whole time where he is just like, guys, I want to work with you. Come to the White House and meet with me. Come and meet with me. This is what I want. This is what we're trying to do, but I'm open to dealing. And every single time it's the Republicans who are the ones who walk away, and it makes him look more reasonable.
Yeah, well, he's the calming Uncle Joe. And look, I said that during the primary that he was the calm one. He was the one who was, viewed a little bit more rational. So that, interestingly enough, that's the way they went. So I'm not surprised that this is where he's continued.
And if they're going to, do a bunch of hearings and start impeachment proceedings and all of that stuff, then there really is no point for anybody to be in Washington. right? Like it's just going to be a complete S show. And I mean, folks shouldn't be anyway. We spend too much time with politicians in Washington.
Yeah.
We need to spend more time in the States anyway.
Yeah, get home and start filling some potholes. Yeah. Here's a shovel. Get out there and start filling some potholes. Make yourself useful.
I love the idea of actually giving them a shovel.
Yeah, absolutely, without question.
But so yeah, it's exciting to see that it was not a complete disaster, and I think that's really sort of funny that we're, it's kind of like
it's exciting to see we're not a theocracy today. It's exciting to see that we're not going to be like,
our expectations are really, really low at this point. It's like the zombie apocalypse didn't happen. We're not all dead yet,
but here's my problem.
But it could happen.
But look, 2 years isn't that far down the road. My fear is nothing gets done. Republicans do what they do best: gridlock, delay, stall, cause headaches, hold the country hostage over the debt ceiling. All of these things that we know are coming. And then voters go, no, look what Joe Biden didn't get done. We're going to go back to the crazy guy. And then all the bad stuff happens.
I think that's the key part of what Biden needs to be doing for the next 2 years is every single time we have this strange, Republican, like Biden wants to do something and Republicans don't. I think over and over again, he needs to remind us that he's the one who's trying to get stuff done. And I think it won't be a hard sell because, you've got, it's not like Biden is pushing Obamacare. He's pushing policies that people understand our government's role.
Right. But he should be pushing Obamacare because freaking South Dakota just voted to expand Medicaid.
Yeah.
South the freaking Dakota.
That's how you know Obamacare is a BFD. After all. But that's the thing too, is like 10 years ago, Obama was just like, yeah, you're going to love me. This is great. But in the meantime, he just completely, flatlined every Democrat in the country for a while. It took a minute.
Yeah. Is it possible Trump's going to do that to Republicans? Because I look at the Wall Street Journal editorial board headline, the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper of the investor class. The headline read, Trump is the Republican Party's biggest loser. He has now flopped in 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Is he the albatross around their neck now?
I think he is the albatross. I don't think that Republicans are going to consider it that. I think maybe a couple of them will think, oh, we need to find somebody else other than Donald Trump, and we need to get rid of him. But the problem is that he controls the voters. It isn't a matter of controlling the politicians and this handshake between them. It really is about his supporters believe that he is the second coming.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, because I was just reading an article that said, it was over at NBC News, and they were saying that, across the board, Republican candidates who lost are admitting they lost, which is like, oh my gosh, I thought they were all election deniers, with the notable exception of a couple, like Doug Mastriano, who still, after getting blown out by 14 points, still has not conceded, and I doubt will. But I look at, to your point, I look at in Maine, where Paul LePage, remember when Paul LePage was the extreme of the Republican Party? He conceded, and literally all of the people in the audience lost their 11 freaking minds.
That was the most hilarious thing I have ever heard. Like, there was a woman who was apparently like sobbing violently and like cursing and all this stuff. And it's like, man, I have never in my life felt that emotional about any politician.
No,
ever.
Right?
I think I probably cried that much at my brother's funeral. That's about it. That's like something you do at a funeral. That's not something you do at an election party. It's like, dang, dude. Yeah, I've lost a lot of elections whenever I used to work in politics.
Exactly,
I
right?
worked in red states, right? Like, I got really good at losing.
So it's all your fault.
Right. It's me. Blame all the red states. Blame it on me.
We're going to blame it on Sarah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Now, the Mastriano thing is huge because understand he got blown out by 14, the biggest beating of an open seat since the 40s. This is the first time Pennsylvania has had a three consecutive term governor of the same party since the 1950s. This was a big deal, and it just goes to show just how extreme Mastriano and the Trumpites really are. And I'm hoping that this wasn't just a one-off, that it was women who were angry and Generation Z who came out in big numbers, and that this just won't be a one-time thing. I'm hoping this carries over into the future, because I think we were this close to being a theocracy.
I think so too. The data analyst at the Center for American Progress, I wrote about an interview that he did today that was super interesting to me. He said that it wasn't a turnout game for Democrats. It wasn't that Democrats came out and voted. In fact, in 2020, I think he said the Democratic vote dropped by like 2 percentage points, and that it was consistent in 2022 as well. So there were more Republicans than Democrats voting. The difference is that there were 11 billion independents who were on our side. And I think that, again, that goes back to that reasonable man game. If we have politicians who appear as though they are the adults in the room, I think that gives the case to the electorate to be like, dude, the only way you're going to save us is by voting for Democratic candidates, because these Republicans are just going to keep getting more and more and more extreme.
Yeah, and the extremes on both sides, really. I've pushed back over the years over this. I'm the first ever candidacy. I don't want to know that you're the first ever. I want you to be right on the issues. How are you going to make my life better? I don't care about any of your personal life. I don't care about any of that stuff. That's not what's important to me. What's important to me, what policies are you going to push for? What are you going to bring to the table that's going to make our lives better? And I think Democrats did that a little bit better this time around.
I think they had incredible message discipline. I know that a big piece of, I think, an independent voter's role is that if they're not tied to a party, then they are more likely to pay attention to all ideas. They're not just voting a straight ticket. I don't know that that's necessarily founded in data. That's just the sense that I get from meeting independent voters. And so it feels like they were actually listening to some of the things that the candidates were saying, and the candidates were on message. They were, and the things that Republicans were saying didn't really make a lot of sense. Republicans were talking about, oh, the Democrats are so liberal, Joe Biden is so far left. And it's like, he spent the last 2 years fighting for roads and bridges. Like, that is not a left-wing policy.
Yeah, those hippie liberal bridges.
You really can't spend that. And it's the same thing we were talking about what happened in Oklahoma when they were trying to say the Democrat there was a big old liberal and she had switched parties from being a Republican. It's just, it doesn't fit. And I think voters are smarter than that. At least I hope they are.
That's kind of the hope, right?
That is the hope. There was an old quote from The West Wing where Charlie Young says, voters aren't stupid during elections. Voters get treated like they're stupid during elections. And I vacillate on that one. Sometimes I really, and I think too, it may depend on where you're from.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But I was reading your article on this, and this idea of popularism, and what you wrote is a theory of electoral politics that emphasized the importance of adopting poll-tested issue positions and exercising message discipline. And I read that, and I'm going, well, that's what the Republicans have mastered.
Yeah.
Over years. So basically, you're just saying, be like the Republicans.
Yeah, and honestly, it's what used to be the way we did campaigns back in the day. Is you did a big ass, expensive $30,000. Well, then it was $30,000. Probably now it's really expensive. Poll where you asked people in the district, what matters to you, and then you take what matters to them and you talk to them about it. I mean, it's really not rocket science. But you drill down to those specifics like that.
Yeah, but it means you have to talk to people.
And we've talked before about how you really have to get into communities and figure out what specifically is impacting those communities to be able to talk about it in a way that, you know, shows you actually are listening to what folks are saying, and you know, like, it's this bridge that's broken, it's this pothole that's screwing up everybody's, you know, suspension, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's because potholes, that's a bipartisan issue. Everyone wants the potholes fixed. Nobody wants the front end alignment bill. At least I don't. And you get a couple other articles that caught my attention I wanted to talk about. Mike Pence has got a book, evidently. I'm not reading it. I'm going to tell you up front. I'm not reading Mike Pence's book. But evidently blaming the Lincoln Project for January 6th, huh?
Yeah. So interestingly, he tried to say that the whole idea of protesting the vote on January 6th, that nobody was talking about that until the Lincoln Project started running an ad about it.
Nobody was talking about what? The protest or the violence?
The idea that they could that Republicans could protest the vote on the 6th, and that Americans could show up on the 6th and, you know, pitch a big fit.
No, I remember Donald Trump saying that in Allentown, you know, a long time before anything came out. I remember knowing people who were at the event in Allentown because a company that I used to work for sent a set of doubles to put behind them because Trump gave them $700 million. And that was kind of a payoff to go, hey, put your truck behind me, because he liked to have trucks as props behind him.
God.
But he said it then. So this wasn't the Lincoln Project. This was Donald Trump himself.
And I mean, that's the one thing that the January 6th committee has really uncovered, is at what point did the memos start coming in about you know, some of these crazy plots and their ideas. And we're talking like November, like not long after the election, they were talking about ways to do this, and specifically about the 6th. And even Trump said, you know, announced his big rally before the Lincoln Project did this ad. And so it's just such selective denialism on Mike Pence's part. And two, I mean, based on what we know just from the January 6th committee and what we have heard about Pence's experience and who was down there with him and the conversations he was having with Nancy Pelosi, because we've seen her version of it. I mean, the way that he portrays this, and it just seems so sanitized, you know, like it seems like a Mary Poppins kind of version of January 6th, the way that he describes it. And it's so I'm not sure that does him any favors. You know,
well,
like,
I mean, he's a guy who does live in Fantasyland. So, you know, does it surprise me? Does it surprise you? Fantasy is kind of going to be it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. There's no win for him here. So why not just be honest about it and tell people, you know, what really happened and what you really felt, and then people are going to be more likely to buy your book. But if it's this, you know, sort of Disney version of what actually happened on the 6th, like, what's the point?
You know, as has been told to me, evidently he can't be alone with Mary Poppins without Mother.
Yes, that is very sad, unfortunately.
But we also find out that from the book, and correct me if this is wrong, that even, you know, Eastman, the lawyer, didn't believe what he was telling Trump. That this was even worse than, because I've said, look, I get if you're a true believer and you truly believe you're fighting the good fight because you're an absolute, you know, ideologue and you're on that path. That's one thing, but to do something like this because it's politically expedient, it's advantageous, it's another way to work around, and you know what you're doing is wrong, I think that's worse. So I think this argument is even worse for Eastman.
Yeah, and we had heard a little bit about Eastman from the Oval Office meeting on January 5th. Where basically everybody was yelling at him, being like, if you took this to the Supreme Court, it's gonna die 9-0. And he admitted, well, maybe 7-2, all right, 9-0. Well, it turns out there was a whole conversation before that with Mike Pence in the Oval Office with Eastman, where Eastman admitted yeah, this probably isn't legal, or this isn't, this isn't the way it should work, and this is probably isn't going to work. And he made it super clear to Donald Trump, days before the 5th and then before the 6th. So the fact that Donald Trump then got up on stage and said, we're going to the Capitol, and hopefully Mike Pence doesn't betray us. I think that is another piece of evidence that proves that Trump knew that everything that he was saying was a lie.
Yeah. So what happens to the January 6th committee when Republicans take over the House?
I think they're going to shut the committee down before the Republicans take over, because they don't want Republicans to have access to a bunch of that stuff. I know that throughout the course of the entire committee, they have been working on their final report. So I'm sure that report what would be very nice, I think, is if that came out for Christmas. But I don't know when they're going to finally publish the final report, but I think absolutely they're going to try and shut the thing down before they swear in a new Congress.
Yeah, because you got to open up the new Congress so that we can have all of the ridiculous hearings that are going to be coming.
Yeah, there's going to be a whole new hearing.
And look, for doing the things that we do, that might be, somewhat entertaining. If we're going to not get anything done for 2 years, at least allow the crazies. Can you imagine Marjorie Trainwreck Green as the head of any committee?
I know, right? And I think too, the thing that would bother me is somebody like Jim Jordan, all he does is yell and yell and yell, and it's just like, oh, stop talking so loud. Like, you got to turn the volume down because he's so loud, and he doesn't really say anything. So I think if it was, a hearing where they were actually going to say something that, maybe it was crazy and right wing, but at least it sounded like they maybe planned it ahead of time, then that would be maybe a little bit more entertaining. I could write a thought piece on it. But if it's just going to be Jim Jordan up there, gesticulating wildly and yada yada yada, it's just like, really, do I need to cover this? Really?
Yeah. Does Kevin McCarthy, does he get to be speaker? Because I see Matt Gaetz is trying to kill it. The freedom, the quote unquote freedom caucus, they're going to try and torpedo this. Do you think he makes it?
Oh man, I hope he doesn't. I think that would just be the chef's kiss. I think if he does make it, at some point in the near future, he's going to get thrown under the bus by Donald Trump. And so even if he does make it to speaker, I don't think he's going to speaker very long.
I actually want him to get it on a certain level because I want him to be miserable. Because I want him to, no, seriously, this is one of those things where you go, okay, this is what you asked for. Now you have to deal with all of the crazy. You're going to have to justify all of the insanity. And are you willing to put your name into history as being the one who led the insanity? I'm like, you go for it. This is what you want. Be careful what you wish for, because you're going to, are you going to get it?
Tally ho, mate. Here, let me open the door for you.
And finally, let's end on a horrible note. Evidently, some hatred found at the Obama presidential senator.
Yeah, somebody had. So they're putting this Obama Center together. It's not necessarily going to be a normal everyday presidential library. He really is trying to make it into like a community center, so it would have classrooms and conference spaces and places where people can meet, as well as a branch of the city library. And the structure, it's like a 30-acre structure in Southside Chicago, so it just sounds like the most beautiful thing ever. And so they're working on this project, and somebody put a noose at the scene, at the site, on the construction site.
Not surprising. Like, stupid's going to be stupid. But I'm looking forward to opening. I'm a big fan of presidential libraries. I've been to a bunch of them. I'm hoping for that one to open soon. But this is sad. Again, it's the kind of craziness that you, I guess we've come to expect. But Sarah, as always, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, thank you, and you as well, and have an awesome weekend.
I will give that a try. Our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter over at Raw Story. Rawstory.com is the website where you can check out all of the incredible work that she does there. Highly suggest it. Make sure you go rawstory.com. That's the site. Of course, if you miss any portion of our program, grab the podcast. You can do that at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1887. That was the day that Louis Ling died in prison while awaiting execution for his alleged role in a bombing at a workers' rally at Haymarket Square in Chicago the year before. Louis was born in Germany. His father worked for a lumber mill. One day, while trying to clear a log jam, his father fell into an icy river. Although Lewis's father lived, he could no longer carry the same workload. The company fired him despite his 20 years of service. Lewis began to question a labor system that would let this happen. He became a carpenter's apprentice. Lewis then traveled to Switzerland, where he became acquainted with anarchist worker groups. Finally, in 1885, Lewis made his way to the United States and Chicago. There he joined the Carpenters and Joiners Union. He became an outspoken advocate for the cause of the 8-hour workday. The movement had great success in Chicago, and on May 1st, or May Day, thousands marched in the streets for the 8-hour cause. When a bomb was thrown at a workers' rally 3 days later, the backlash against the labor movement was swift and brutal. 8 men, including Louis Ling, stood trial and were convicted despite a lack of evidence tying them to the bombing. Louis Ling and 4 others were sentenced to death by hanging. But the day before the sentence was to be carried out, Louis lit a cigar in his prison cell. The cigar was packed with explosives. The explosion left Louis in agony for hours before he finally died. Some believe he committed suicide rather than die at the hands of the legal system. Others believe he was murdered. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
America exists today as a bizarre anomaly. We profess to be an electoral democracy, yet we are ruled by a governmental plutocracy. One especially gross example of this incongruity is the overwhelming power of big money over the people's will. By a wide margin, Americans of all political stripes want to ban the distorting force of huge electoral campaign donations by favor-seeking corporations and ultra-rich elites. Yet, nothing. National and state lawmakers take the plutocratic money and promptly bury democratic reforms that would stop the gusher of corrupt cash. An analysis of donations in this year's congressional races shows that this plutocratic perversion of our politics and government has reached absurd levels. Historian Nancy McLean and public interest advocate Frank Clemente have documented that the 2 main super PACs trying to put Republicans in Congress got about half of their $188 million election fund from just 27 billionaires. Also, a corporate front that backs GOP candidates, Club for Growth, got nearly $35 million from only 3 billionaires. Thanks to years of congressional stonewalling and the steady partisan stacking of our top courts with corporate ideologues, there is essentially no limits on this purchase of lawmakers. Indeed, the biggest donors are even allowed to undermine democracy in secret, not revealing their identity. Lawmakers elected with this money not only support the billionaires' special interest agenda, which the people don't want, but also are fierce opponents of any reforms to increase voter participation in our governing process, which people do want. This is Jim Hightower saying that's why, for example, efforts to guarantee every eligible American a constitutional right to vote have not moved forward in Congress, even though the great majority of people favor it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, I was hoping for good things on Tuesday night. And, well, a lot of good things did happen on Tuesday night and I'm not a big Ben Shapiro fan, but the red wave, his quote, the red wave turned into a red wedding is kind of the right response to what happened to the Republicans on Tuesday, and no more than here in Pennsylvania. And here to share some thoughts on the victory that was and how this is going to help working families moving forward. I've asked our good friend Eddie Day Pashinsky to come share some thoughts. You may remember Eddie, the beginning of our Working Class Heroes tour. We stopped up in Scranton. Eddie was one of the folks who sat down with us. It's great to have him back now in the majority. Eddie, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you very much, Rick, for having me on. And how uplifting is it that these results are in this fashion? Quite honestly, we worked very hard trying to improve the number of votes that we had. Remember, the gerrymandering that took place for the last 20 years with Republicans on the other side has definitely put us in harm's way. But the working class now has a chance. It's my understanding, it's official, that we are the majority, which means now we have an opportunity to actually reintroduce all those good quality bills that will help our working class folks, that will help the folks that have families. We're talking about trying to reduce property taxes. You saw what President Biden did, the cost of insulin way down to $35 instead of $300-400. Also, the Medicare stuff, where maximum the amount they can spend is only $2,000 instead of $10,000, and of course the infrastructure bill, which we haven't even had the opportunity yet to get involved and get started. That's going to be happening next year and the year after for the next 5-10 years. So I'm excited. I talked to my colleagues today, and I'm sure you saw the press conference earlier yesterday. It was absolutely uplifting. And this has restored my faith in the people. I've always felt there's more good than not. These people are starting to watch, they're listening, and now they're holding accountable their representatives. And that is the power of by and for the people. So congratulations to the people that came out.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, Eddie, and you led with this right from the beginning. The maps were so important, I think, in this. You know, the fact that over the last 2 decades we've had rigged maps. When you have fairer maps, when you have more competitive maps, when you're running on ideas and on policies as opposed to, it being over before it starts, this is possibly the outcome you get. More competitive districts, more competitive races, more opportunities for working people to have a say. Or am I reading too much into this?
No, you're not. You are 100% correct. The other thing that has to change, Rick, is Citizens United. There's entirely too much money in the elections. I don't know whether you can verify these numbers, but on a national basis, it's my understanding it was over $60 billion for these races. That's a waste of money. And here in Pennsylvania, I think it was over $100 million spent on the senatorial race. $100 million. Now, where does an average person that is qualified to run, where could you possibly get millions of dollars in order to run? I don't know if you and I talked about this, but Congressman Konjorsky, who also comes from my hometown of Nanticoke, he and I had a conversation some time ago, and I said, Congressman, how much money did you need in order to run for the United States Congress? And now that's a good 10 years ago or more. And he said anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000. Now that's a lot of money to regular folks like us. I come from a background. My dad was a miner. He was in World War II. We lived in a half a double block. It's incredible. Where do you get that kind of money? Yeah. Now, because of Citizens United, all of that big money, the billionaire dollar money, is now going into these special accounts. And then that's being funneled into the voting system. And now they're basically buying the elections. They're buying it with their money by putting people in place, that are going to support big money. Yep. Now, look, we need fair and balance. We need big business. We need medium business. We need small business. We need the worker. Let's be fair about it, okay? You pay your fair taxes, and we should get a fair reward. And it appears that right now they just want to take care of the guys on top.
Yeah.
That's not where I come from.
The best democracy money can buy. And a little correction, you said 100 million for the Senate race. Last number I saw put it over 350 million.
Oh my, that's even worse.
So I mean, it's really obscene the amount of money that's been spent. And you're right, to highlight the fact that Citizens United has done this. You go back to 2010, it was something like 32 million dollars spent by our billionaires. Now it's well over $1 billion just by our billionaire class. So the amount of money that's just being funneled into getting the wealthy what they want is just obscene. And this is where, again, it comes back to regular working people waking up and going, "Hey, the game's rigged. We need more Eddie Day Paszynskis in the legislature and in Congress and across our political spectrum."
And there are more people like me out there that will be able to get into the House of Representatives or a senator and represent the people honestly and fairly. The other thing I want to bring out to your listeners, that money, those millions and billions of dollars, how was that used? It was used by creating advertisement that was false and misleading and ugly and disgusting. And they kept on playing those things time and time and time again. So I joked around and I said, the advertisement, the negative ads against me were terrible. And they were misinformed and much of it was lies, okay? I said, if I didn't know me and I saw those ads about me, I wouldn't have voted for me either. That's how bad they were.
Yeah. No, and look, we traveled throughout numerous states over our Working Class Heroes tour, through Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Indiana and Illinois and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa. We were all these places, and you were so spot on. All the ads we saw were attack ads, and they were cookie cutter. You just insert, candidate A into this ugly attack ad, and that's what they ran with. Know how we're going to make working people's lives better. Know how we're going to improve education. Know how we're going to improve healthcare. Know how we're going to make the country better. Just the other guy's horrible.
Exactly.
And that's a problem.
And it is a problem, and that's why I'm so excited that this red wave that was supposed to take place, which historically took place for many presidential elections for many decades, because the administration in power generally doesn't get done all the things that the people expect. They then try to get the other party in.
Yeah.
But the Republican Party is so far to the right that people are waking up and realizing that they are extreme, and they can't allow that to occur.
Now, as you were knocking on doors and doing all the kissing baby stuff, were you expecting Tuesday night's results? Because look, I expected both Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman to win. I didn't expect the blowout that was the governor's race. I expected it to be a little bit closer, but the reality is the people of Pennsylvania did overwhelmingly reject somebody who is the definition of extreme, in my view.
Well, but again, analyze the candidate, Oz. Now, why would a millionaire, multimillionaire with the 9 mansions all over the world want to become a senator of Pennsylvania where he doesn't even really reside? Okay, you know why? Because they want to control the Senate, control the votes, which means what? We're going to lower the taxes for the billionaires and billionaires.
Again,
and we're going to raise the taxes on the little guy.
Again.
That's why he's there, to control the power of the money.
No, you're spot on right.
And listen, we're all Americans here. As I said earlier, we need big business. And I applaud anyone that's worked their tail off and created a very prosperous business, and through families have developed multi-million-dollar now billion. I give you all the credit in the world, but you pay your fair share, just like the regular working class guy has to pay his fair share. They don't have attorneys to go and try to manipulate their dollars. The big guy does. I'm saying let's come down to the word is balance. Yeah. Balance and fairness. I'm willing to pay my fair share. Most people are willing to pay their fair share, but the big guy on top has to do the same. Let's bring your money that you're making in this country back from overseas, so you're not having to pay that tax that everybody else does. Let's close the Delaware loophole so that our big businesses in Pennsylvania pay their fair share. That's all we're asking for, and I think the people expect the same thing. Yeah. Let's just be fair. We're all Americans before we're anything else. Come on, let's come together.
There you go. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Pennsylvania State Representative Eddie Day Pashinsky, talking about Tuesday's election results, and good ones they were, especially here in the state of Pennsylvania. Let me ask you this now. You're first time in a very long time, Democrats are going to be in charge of the House. The governor's mansion, obviously, Josh Shapiro will be governor. Democrats will have the governor's mansion, but the Senate still overwhelmingly Republican. What's going to get done?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I've already discussed with my leadership. I sent a message to them and I've talked to them. I'm going to tell you what it is. Right now, Rick, we have hundreds of excellent bills that we cannot get passed because the Republicans have the majority in the House and the Senate. And as a result, they will not bring our bills, not even into committee for discussion. That's going to change. We're going to bring our bills that will help the people of Pennsylvania into committee for discussion so the people know exactly what the Democrats are trying to present for the betterment of the people of Pennsylvania. If the Senate is going to challenge us, we're going to let the people know this is a great bill, why it's a great bill, how it will help the people of Pennsylvania, and then the people of Pennsylvania can call those senators up and make sure they move in the right direction.
Yeah, start putting some pressure on.
That's it. So the idea is, and again, we coming together as Americans, as Pennsylvanians. Are we going to agree on everything 100%? No, but we have to improve. We have to try to improve the lives of the constituents that we represent. And many of our bills do that.
So give me an idea of a couple of them. I mean, I got to imagine raising the minimum wage has got to be high on that list, no?
Yeah, and again, Governor Wolf has presented this before, and it was done in a systematic way, so it doesn't just jump from $7.25, which is absurd today, up to $15. You know, it would jump maybe to $9.30, then to $12, and then eventually to $15. And by the way, after the pandemic, at least in northeastern Pennsylvania here, places like Chewy and our distribution centers are paying $17, $18, $19, $20 an hour right now. McDonald's is paying $15 an hour. So that's just the common sense thing there. We also presented ways that we could eliminate the delay in counting our mail-in ballots, and they refused to discuss any of that pre-canvassing. We have a bill, it's called the Delayed Payment Plan, where the kids that go to college, and we need people to get a degree, like for nursing, for teaching, we need those jobs, a way to go to college without having to pay for it. Now, bear me out, it's not free. Our proposal doesn't mean it's free. It means they go through the college system without any cost, as long as they maintain their academic standards, etc. And then when they come out, they get their job, they pay. That's when they start paying back their loan, so to speak, 2% of whatever it was for a 10-year period without interest. Now you're giving that kid a chance to develop and grow a family. And what else? They got the job. What does that mean? They're now buying goods in Pennsylvania. They're paying taxes in Pennsylvania. That money comes back into the system again. So it's not free. They have to work for it, but we're going to give them a chance to become a property owner and someone that's participating in our democracy.
No, this is kind of stuff that I've been talking about for a very long time, especially on the student loan front. It's insane to me that we've thrown our children into the wolves' den and allowed them to be exploited, and then telling them this is the only path. This is the only way you're going to get into the middle class is to take out these life-altering loans and being saddled with them for the rest of your life in hopes that you may land a job that's going to afford you the ability to pay it back. It's insane to me what it's doing, and I think this is where a lot of this is coming from. You got a lot of kids who are going, no, never mind, we're gonna forego this, which is bad for us as a country.
Yeah, it's bad because in the long term they lose. And by the way, it's not just the college education. It's also your apprentice programs, where our unions have done an outstanding job of developing these apprentice programs where the participants get paid while they learn, while they're educated on the job. So they're getting paid while they're learning and they're doing the work. And in 4 or 5 years, they get their certification. And now they're a certified plumber, electrician, carpenter, steel worker, pipe fitter, and we need that.
Good stuff. No, if we're going to rebuild the country, we need people who actually know how to do this. So last thing I've got for you, and I don't know if you were paying attention to Illinois on Tuesday night, but Illinois, the state, passed an incredible piece of legislation, an amendment to their constitution guaranteeing the workers their ability to collective bargaining. The workers' rights amendment there passed overwhelmingly 60-40 in the state of Illinois. Any chance we get something like that here, moving in a direction that we make Pennsylvania? Because look, I look at this last election, a Mastriano in the governor's office meant Pennsylvania was going to be a no rights at work state. Is there a way for us to go, you know what, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen for future generations and make sure that collective bargaining rights are inculcated in law?
Yes, and I want to remind your listeners, there would be no middle class if it wasn't for Act 1935. Back in 1935, the Collective Bargaining Act, rather. It's collective bargaining in our unions that have increased the living standards for all Americans, whether a union guy or not. And that is the thing that's maintained our middle class and now has even grown to the upper middle class. Yes, I'm a union guy. My dad was a coal miner. I understand the purpose of unions. I've been a member of the teachers union, and I joke around and I say I'm a member of the toughest union in the entire United States of America. That's the American Federation of Musicians.
There you go.
I'm still a card-carrying member, a paid card-carrying member of the AFM, and as a result, I think it's over 55 years that I've paid. If it wasn't for the unions, we wouldn't have what we have today. Our living standards would not be where they are today. Unions aren't perfect. None of us are perfect. But I guarantee you, we would not have the middle class that we have today. And as a result, we've got to protect that. So I certainly would be willing, and I know my colleagues would be willing in making sure that there's no way this would be a right to work state.
Yeah, we need to make sure of that. But Eddie, congratulations. I'm looking forward to the next 2 years with the Democrats here in Pennsylvania, with the majority, and looking forward to the legislation you're going to move and the hope and the opportunity that we're going to come out of it.
Well, Rick, I appreciate this very much. I know you can feel the excitement. I see the excitement in you, and I hope your listeners also. Bottom line to your listeners, of, by, and for the people. The power of your vote is key, but it's not just the power of your vote. You got to make sure you find the truth, find the facts. So when that vote, when you make that vote, it's for the right purpose, the right reason, and the right candidate.
There you go. Eddie,
Thank you very
so
much, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Eddie Dave Pashinsky. And look, the reality is I'm looking forward to the coming weeks and months to see the legislation. And I want to see Republicans tell us why we can't have these things, why we can't have nice things. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program? Make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people of the thought. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day that Hormel plant workers in Austin, Minnesota began a sit-down strike. The company head, Jay Hormel, boasted that his company was a benevolent dictatorship. Workers agreed that the company was a dictatorship, but not very benevolent. The 1929 stock market crash and Great Depression hit the Hormel plant hard. Hormel implemented a plan to spread the work to keep as many workers employed as possible. Some workers called the plan Spread the Misery. There was a major reduction in the number of hours worked by each employee. Due to the policy, Hormel employees joined the ranks of the working poor. By the spring of 1933, Hormel workers were seriously discontent. Few knew much about union organizing. However, one worker, Joseph Ellis, had been involved in labor organizing in the past. When he was hired at Hormel, the company did not check into his background. Ellis was eventually made a casing room foreman. From there, he could hire and fire workers. He began hiring former meatpacking union and IWW members. The workers organized and won union recognition, but little else. For one thing, the company never gave the union a copy of their signed contract. Hormel also refused to raise wages. And on this historic day, union members gathered in a show of solidarity. They did not plan to strike, but had hoped to get the attention of the company by taking a strike vote. However, after the vote to strike passed, enthusiastic union members rushed to the plant. The workers there suspended all operations. A strike was underway. And nearly a month later, the State Industrial Commission mandated wage increases for all the workers.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Gary sent me an email. Thought kind of funny, got a little humor, if you will. Gary writes, Rick, I think it's time for Trump to bail on the loser Republican Party and start a third political party, the Trump Party. He said Marjorie Taylor Greene would be an excellent vice president, and who better than Lauren Boebert for Secretary of State? I'm starting to write letters today. Can you imagine Gun Fetish Barbie as the Secretary of State? Seriously, I mean, can you imagine that? Yeah, I shudder. No, I'm not there, not there. But thanks for the thoughts there, Gary. I'm sure this was in jest and the humor was there. But back to something Eddie said. The reality is Eddie's right. Unions built the middle class. And, I've said this before, growing up as a kid, when you saw someone get a union job, their lives got better immediately. Union job, better life. Meant food at the end of the month, meant better opportunities. Kids got better clothes, kids, secondhand bikes, secondhand cars, eventually moved out of the projects, all that stuff. Lives got better. So when I saw this article over at the Inquirer, again, interesting story. Saw the headline. I did not know the Inquirer, the Philly Inquirer, had a sex and love department, but they do. And the title was Name, Age, and Local 19, Why Philly Men List Their Unions on Tinder. And I'm going, yeah, I understand. Tinder's all about, hey, look at me. And you get only, and this is what the article points out, that you only get a very short, you get one picture and a line or two to make your case and, hey, why you would want to come to me. And guys are going, hey, look, I got a union job. And you know what that means? That means disposable income. That's the message. And as bizarre as it sounds, and when I was reading the article, I was kind of chuckling that this reporter spent hours, going through Tinder trying to get these union guys to go back and talk about why they put that there. But it's interesting that she did, because in a place like Philly where union density is still quite high, people understand union job, better life. Union job, not going to be broke at the end of the month. Union job, cupboards aren't going to be empty. Union job, health care. Union job, retirement security. Union job, job security. Not going to get fired for no reason. I get it. And I'm not surprised. I'll tell you though, I was a little surprised that they actually wrote an article about this, but not surprised that that's something people do. Because the messaging's right. The messaging's right there. Look, this is something. And I think, especially as the younger generation grabs onto this, it's going to return to, again, back to the thinking that I had as a kid. When you saw somebody with a union job, you go, hey, there's somebody who's doing okay. There's someone who's buying a house and has a new car and takes vacations and kids get to go to college. These are people who are working hard, playing by the rules, but getting ahead. And this kind of stuff, really important messaging. So for my union brethren, if you're on Tinder, which I don't have the app, married. Maybe this is one of those things where you go, hey, yeah, this makes sense. Makes sense. Throw that in there. Maybe it catches some attention because, it means disposable income. It means I can take you on a date. There is that. But thanks to the good folks over at the Inquirer for this story. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, make sure you grab the podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You'll find ours. If not, just go to thericksmithshow.com. It's all right there for you. Also, love to hear your thoughts. You got questions, you got comments, something I said made you think, got under your skin. Definitely want to hear that. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.